Hey guys, Jaryd Krause, host of the Buying Online Businesses podcast. And do you want to learn how to scale your online business without adding any extra hours to your schedule? Well, in this podcast episode, I speak to Dave Jenyns from System Hub, who is a master at online businesses and scaling online businesses through systems. He actually helped publish Michael Gerber's E-Myth Revised and has done TED Talks all around the world on systems. And in this episode, we talk about how to create really good systems for your team so your business can grow, how it can help your clients get better results, and how it can provide a better work environment for your actual staff as well. We also talk about how systems are life and how important it is that if we can master these systems in our life and our business, we get better results and we have a better life. Also, listen to this podcast all the way to the end because Dave gives you a very valuable thing that you can go away and do that's going to help you grow your business as well. So listen to it all the way to the end. Such a very powerful and valuable episode. You don't want to miss this one, guys. Hey guys, it's Jaryd Krause, host of the Buying Online Businesses podcast. And today I'm speaking with David Jenyns from System Hub. And I had the delight of speaking to David earlier in the week about what he actually does. And he's such a humble human and knows so much about systems and so much about SEO. And you've actually also just sold your video production company. And David, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. And yeah, welcome.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for the invite and look forward to sharing.
So, David, you're a big advocate for systems, being System Hub, and you've also got Systemology, which is the process on creating those systems. And for myself, when I first got into business, I didn't even know systems were a thing until a few years ago. I didn't even know what an SOP was, right? I had to Google what an SOP was. And for everybody listening, that's, what is it? Systems of procedure?
Standard operating procedure. They got
yeah.
so many different names. It's confusing. Some people call them systems. Some people call them processes, procedures, SOPs, standard operating procedures, checklists. Like there's so many different names and some of them do have little nuances, but it can be just, I think that's another reason why it can be confusing.
Yeah. And how did you move into this space of systems? Because it's automating and systemizing a business allows a really good, a better lifestyle, right? Allows you to work on your business rather than in your business. How did you move into this space?
Yeah, if I look back, there were a few early seeds planted, and it was only probably, in the last 5 years that I got really obsessed with them. But the early seeds, I used to be very interested in trading the stock market, and we used to build what's called a trading plan, and it was just effectively a system. You would predefine when you're going to buy, when you're going to sell, what your money management looked like. So that idea of systems, that programming was there very early on. And then also I was involved, one of the first businesses I got involved in was a rock and roll clothing music store. And my business partner at the time, their plan was to roll these out as franchises. So the first store we set up was like a franchise prototype. And again, we had franchise manuals. We had, we'd read the E-Myth and some of those books that talk about systemizing business, and we were sold on the idea and started down that journey. But it was funny then, a whole bunch of different things happened in between. And then I ended up having a digital agency that I was running. And then I got stuck in that business for 10 years or more. And for some reason in my head, I was like, I can't systemize this business. This business is different. Google's always changing. The online landscape's changing too much. There's no way to systemize this because anytime I write a system, it just very quickly becomes out of date. So I believed in systems but then for whatever reason at that time, I just thought, no, it's just not right for me until kind of I had a defining moment where I re-looked at things and I thought, I can't just keep working these 60-hour work weeks, 70-hour work weeks, having the business reliant on me. And then that's when I started to make a few critical changes and looked back on, what worked and what didn't, and then rebuilt what we've got today.
Yeah, that's quite a journey. And I know the whole not knowing what systems are because I was doing those crazy hour work weeks as well until I started hiring people. I was like, I actually need to teach these guys, and I'm teaching them the same stuff over and over and over. Like, why don't I just like create one training or a system? And
Yeah.
so that's one of the benefits, is like having to say the same thing over and over and over again, and teaching,
Mm-mm.
one-on-one with every single, hire, I guess, or staff member. What other are some of like people that are listening are buying an online business, right? Buying a website.
Yeah.
Like, what are some of the benefits they could have from systemizing their business or getting some systems put in place?
I'm going to put one little definition in here, and then that'll sort of lead into this question. Just, I
Perfect.
suppose, articulating when we say system and all of those different variations I mentioned, what is it that I actually mean? And
Yep.
when I talk about system, I just mean a step-by-step process written out that delivers a consistent outcome. And there are a whole bunch of different things that happen in business, whether it's um, answering an inbound inquiry, whether it's paying wages, whether it's onboarding a client, whether it's doing the work. There are lots of different components that happen in business, and many of them are repeatable. And when we talk about a system or a process, it's capturing that, getting a consistent method that you follow that produces that consistent outcome. So the benefit is business owners, they're so great at solving problems and figuring things out. Oftentimes, though, they keep having to figure the same thing out over and over, or keep repeating doing it over and over. The real power for a business owner is to solve a problem once, figure it out, but then have some system or process that just becomes the way that things are done. So you solve that problem for the future, for all of your staff, for everybody. And it ticks so many different boxes. I mean, obviously saving time is one thing, and you start to get a compound, layered positive effect once you start plugging in multiple systems. The first system might save you 5 or 10 minutes here or there, but then you start to layer systems on systems, and then you're saving hours and weeks by having these processes in place that can then very easily be delegated to someone, but then still the outcome is delivered to a very high standard, and you're getting that consistent approach. So I think getting more time is one thing, and once you've got more time, then that enables the business owner, like you said, to probably to work a bit more strategically on the business, because you step out of the operations and then you start to look at the business and think, right, what problems are going on in the business, and well, how can I solve that with a system? And you start looking for improvements to your overall business system. And that's, I suppose, just thinking in terms of when you're running it. But then beyond that, there's so many other benefits. Definitely reducing waste and onboarding time for staff, improving the staff efficiency, reducing the overall stress across the team, because they know what they're working on and what's required for them. And then even through to the point of when we're talking about selling a business or selling a website, the biggest risk someone has, a potential buyer, is they feel like, if I buy this business, they want to make sure it continues to operate to the same standard, if not more, after the old business owner walks out.
Consistency.
So that's, you think of, a business like a dentist, where maybe these clients are very closely bonded to the dentist, and if someone else was coming in to buy that practice, they would be worried that if that dentist walks out and goes somewhere else, then they're just going to follow that dentist. Or so what we look at doing is really trying to build these businesses that aren't dependent on a specific individual, and then it makes it much more saleable. Like there's a great book, Built to Sell, by John Warrillow, and he talks about this idea of making these businesses not owner dependent, or any team member dependent. You don't want team member dependent businesses. And then that increases the multiple that you can ask for when you're selling your business significantly. You can get 2 and 3x, 4x what you were going to get, based primarily on this idea that you've just heavily de-risked this purchasing opportunity for your new acquirer.
Yeah, that's awesome, because anybody, that new acquirer, can come in and be like, well, my team can do the work, or I can hire a whole new set and they just follow these procedures or these systems. And what I love about what you're saying before is like, your entrepreneurs or business owners aren't buying a business and then having to solve a problem and then solve that same problem again and again and again. And what I've noticed in my life
Mm,
earlier on is like, decision fatigue is like an actual thing. Like,
yeah.
I would get to the weekend and I'd be like, oh man, like, and my partner was just like, like, I wasn't really stepping into my masculinity and making decisions and being decisive on the weekend, because it's like, oh, we'll just do whatever you want to do, because I was so tired, I didn't want to make decisions anymore.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
was really bad and maybe your business is going good, but your relationship's terrible. And I would take my relationship over my business any day. And I think that you having these systems is really good, because it prevents you from having to make that decision and solving that problem over and over again. You talked about team stress as well, and it prevents decision fatigue for your team too, because it's like, oh, what do I do? I'm going to have to ask a really good question to Jaryd to solve this problem. Instead, it's like, oh, I know what to do. I'll just go and follow this system, this procedure.
You hit the nail on the head with decision fatigue. Business is about making decisions. And as you progress and you grow, you want to keep making better quality decisions. You don't want to keep making the same small decisions or answering these low level stuff. The aim is to keep elevating the business owner. They're always sort of, the goal is to get them one step ahead and then able to look objectively and strategically on the business, thinking about the landscape and the direction and solving these higher quality problems. But most business owners, they get stuck in the operations, and it's really about the transition from a startup business through to something that's a little bit more established. Because when you are startup business, it's you're coming up with the ideas, you're getting the runs on the board, you're getting clients, you're collecting testimonials, you're figuring out the flow and the setup. But there needs to be a point at which you then start to transition and start to delegate. And where a lot of business owners have trouble is that transition period, because they're just so used to answering all of the questions, solving all of the problems, and they build up this muscle and they train their staff to always come to them for the solution. Because I know Jaryd is the knight in the shining armor, and he always solves my problems. So maybe I'm just best off to go to Jaryd to get the quick answer. And then you, being the helpful business owner that you are, you give them the answer. But then you create this dependency.
Yeah.
And then this loop happens where, as you know, that's okay maybe if you've got one or two staff. Once you kind of get up to 5, 6 or 7 staff, you just end up spending your entire work week keeping all of your team members busy. You're kind of giving them a bunch of things to do, answering their questions, going to the next one. Then you get all the way to the end, and then you have to run back because the first guy's finished what they're working on and you haven't even had a chance to do your work. And then that's what you end up doing in the evenings or in the mornings or on the weekends. And it's tough, because all of those skills that the business owner used to build up the business to a certain level of success, that all of that is getting reinforced, because that micromanaging, that being across everything, that answering all of the problems is what got you to that level. But then obviously that then becomes that ceiling, and you need to get to a point where you systemize, delegate, give responsibilities to individuals, so you can really sort of start to step out. And it's funny, I used to, when we started with System Hub, I thought, how do we introduce the idea of systems and processes? Is it about this idea of business owners going and lying on the beach and sipping pina coladas and just taking it easy while the business, pumps money into their bank account with little or no work? And then I realized, no, that's not what most business owners want. Like, they enjoy growing the business. I think the key is to at least give the business owner the freedom, at least allow them to work on things they're good at, give them the chance to disconnect. And then once you create that space, that's when you're able to start to see opportunities. Because it's that decision fatigue that you were talking about. If you're so in the thick of it, making decisions and answering all this low-level stuff, you might have the best opportunity fall in your lap and you can't take advantage of it. Or you might not even see that opportunity because you've got your head down and the opportunity's here, but you're busy.
Yeah.
So the systems, it just unlocks a lot of potential and benefit.
I was reading this book. I think it's by Deepak Chopra, the 8 laws of spiritual success or something like that. And when we have so much going on in our mind, it's like if we look at our mind, it's like a pond. And if each thought that we have, like we have lots of thoughts, 10,000 thoughts a day or something like that. And each thought that we have is like throwing a rock into the pond. And when there's just so many rocks going into this pond, it's like really the water's quite turbulent. And you could have a really awesome opportunity that comes along, like that's so big, or you have this really awesome thought that could break through that glass ceiling that we were talking about. And that thought could be as big as like the Empire State Building, and it could fall into the pond and you wouldn't even notice because the water's so turbulent. However, what happens if you had less going on and you had your business more systemized and less thoughts happening? When you throw one little rock into that pond and it's going to create a massive ripple effect and help you break through that ceiling. However, what happens if that big thought comes along, like the Empire State Building, which is going to smash through the next 10 ceilings? It's way more profound growth because you're not just like, you don't have so much going on. And that's why I believe systems are so valuable.
There's a period when I had the big aha that systems is really about creating space to take advantage of opportunities, where the whole turning point for me happened. Found out we were pregnant, didn't want to be that dad who's working 70-hour work weeks and just too busy. My dad had built a business up like that and worked from home, and he was just one of those guys. He was always there, but he was never really there because he was always busy. And I just said, right, I'm not going to be that guy. And that was the turning point for me. And I thought, right, I have to solve this problem for the digital agency. So we systemized the heck out of it over the course of about 12 months or thereabouts. I was trying to line it up with when our first baby arrived. And then just very shortly after I systemized, it was almost like the universe opened up and presented this huge opportunity for me. I had a guy, it was actually his wife, who had seen some work that I'd done and said, oh, look, have you heard of the name Michael Gerber? And I said, oh, I've heard of Michael Gerber. He wrote the book, The E-Myth. And she goes, well, I'm Mrs. Gerber. And I saw what you did for your book launch. And I was wondering if you could launch Michael Gerber's last book in the E-Myth series called Beyond the E-Myth, because it's the first book that we've decided to self-publish rather than going through HarperCollins, because we want to have all the rights to everything. And for that reason, we want to self-publish, which means they're not going to do the book launch. Can you do the book launch for us? Now, I'm not a book launch guy, but she happened to see what I'd done. And I thought, Michael Gerber, they don't even know what I was doing with System Hub and Systemology, which is, indirectly aligned and very heavily influenced. But I took 3 months out of the digital agency because I'd systemized it, hired a CEO. She runs that business to this day. I probably do about half a day a week in that business. And I went away for 3 months and worked full time on Michael Gerber's book launch. Flew over to the States. We did the big book launch. It was his first book to get an Amazon bestseller in 24 hours.
Wow, congrats.
And ended up he had this dreaming room event. And then after that, he had a mastermind that I got to facilitate, because he's in that stage where he's really starting to think about legacy and what happens with everything in that next phase. And I got to facilitate. I was kind of like leading that room with a bunch of different connected players. At the end of that, his wife asked me if I wanted to run the company, and my jaw absolutely hit the floor. And I was like, oh, wow. Timing wise, it wasn't right. There's no way they'd need us to move to the States. And my wife there's a lot of family here, and there's no way I'm getting out of Melbourne unless we took the entire Maltese community with us. So it wasn't the right timing. But what it presented for me was this idea that opportunities can fall in your lap. And if I was, if it was just 12 months earlier and they said, can you work full time on this for 3 months? I wouldn't have been able to say yes, because I was so heavily dependent in the business. But it was the ability to take opportunities and see them, have them, and then really run through. It's like run through to the end and take advantage of them. And I think there's a lot of times when there are opportunities and you might not even recognize them. So systems is about creating space. It's answering the small recurring problems that need to happen in business, or do recurring tasks that have to happen, and then being able to then more easily delegate them and ensure that delivered to a certain standard. So the business owner doesn't need to be doing it. And once the business can start to make money that's not dependent on the business owner, that then just becomes a game changer. And that's when the business owner can start to work on their unique magic.
That's so amazing, that book launch and meeting Michael and working with him. I just want to congratulate you on that. And that's such a testament to what that word that you just said, being space, and what we all should have more of in our lives, especially as business owners. Because what I've learned is that, and most people don't realize this, is that there's only a certain amount of space. And when you've got a certain amount of space, like if you picture a box, you can't just shove more and more and more into it. Like you often need to clear that space with a system or whatever it is, so you can have that space to bring more of those opportunities. Because that, like you said, that wouldn't have happened without the space. So a lot of people listening to this, Dave, are like, all right, cool. I need to get some staff and I need to get some systems happening, and they're going to scale their business this way. What are some of the first steps you would tell somebody who are starting to hire staff, and how do they create systems for them?
The first couple of things is to recognize, because some people have already tried to systemize a little bit before, and maybe they've reached the conclusion that I'm not a systems guy, or this won't work for my business, or my business is different, or we're too creative to systemize, or even if I have systems and processes in place, my team aren't going to follow them, or I don't have enough time to create systems, or the business owner needs to be the person that creates systems. There's all this noise that I find when I have this discussion with business owners that oftentimes bubble up, and they're just, for whatever reason, they've done this little test and they think, that they tried to systemize a certain way and they didn't quite, turn out like McDonald's. Like they thought, hey, I put this system in place. My business should be running like McDonald's. Why can't I get 15-year-olds to come in and do my digital marketing, and, I charge X $1,000, but hire these 10-year-olds to do my work. Like that's they hear that's what they think, and oftentimes it's just so much baggage around systems. So it's working through that baggage, making sure that you've got a proper approach to it. The way that I do it, we have that process called systemology, and I'll just go through the stages quickly. The first step is recognizing that you're not going to need hundreds of systems. You only need a handful of systems, at least initially, to get some traction. If you think about, we have a process called the critical client flow, and you think about, how do you get customers? How do you answer the phone? How do you sell that customer? How do you invoice them, onboard them, deliver the product or service, and then how do you get them to come back? It's almost like a customer journey, but also handles the back office stuff as well, the actual delivery of the work. You map that out first, and that becomes a first great place to start. That might end up being 10 to 15 systems. Just focus on that. Don't worry about systemizing, how we take out the trash, or, how we get our office space ready for the day, or don't worry about, systemize the things that are central to the business making money, so that we can get the business making money without the business owner. So that's kind of step number one. Step number two is assigning. Then you need to think about, depending on the size of your team, like really you want to start thinking about systemizing once you've got at least a few staff. If it's just you, you're probably still figuring things out. You're better off just, maybe doing some high level bullet points, but you're not going to get any real leverage effect by you writing out detailed processes.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to think about, if you've got a bit of a team around you, once you've identified the critical client flow, you then think, who in the team has the knowledge on how to do certain steps in this critical client flow? Who answers the phone, or who is doing the onboarding, or who is doing the invoicing? You identify that, so you've then got a very clear picture of what needs to be systemized and who knows how to do it. Then you move to the next step, which is the extraction. And the extraction is all about making it easy to capture. And I had a big breakthrough when I recognized systemization. It's a two-person job. You've got one person who has the knowledge, and you've got the other person who is the documenter. So just record the person doing the task, but don't necessarily expect them to be the one to write out of all of the detailed documentation. The business owner, if they're recording the system, they're too busy. Oftentimes your best team members are too busy. Everybody loves to edit. No one likes to write from scratch. So record yourself doing the task, give it to someone else to do the first version of the documentation, and then just send that back to the original person and let them edit it. So there's a few things in that's extraction phase. And then, there are some other phases you kind of go through around then. How do you, integrate your, where these how-to documentation is stored, and then some form of project management, because you will need some form of accountability to be able to assign a task to someone and set a due date, and then have the appropriate link to a system or a process. And then, then we kind of move, then there's integration, scale, and optimization. I think I'll skip the next two, but the last one's probably real key.
Awesome. Is
this idea of don't try and make these systems perfect right out of the gate. Some people try and systemize like McDonald's, and I talked about that. They'll read the E-Myth, and he talks about in there, how you'd split test the color of your shirt because it can influence how many people buy. And that's fine when you're a huge multinational, but when you're small and you're just getting started out, you want to think about, how did McDonald's systemize 60 years ago when they were first getting started? Not, let's look at McDonald's now and let's try and systemize like them. Yeah. So the optimization comes last. You just capture what you're doing. You don't want to have anything get in the way of you just recording what's going on. And then you think about optimization at that point. It's at the end of the process, once you've got these base set of, the minimum viable business processes. Get that down, get a dashboard into place, then start to think. That's when the business owner can start to step out, and then they start to do their best work, because then they can start to look for problems and then strategically fix them by adjusting the systems.
Yeah, awesome. And I want to talk about optimization, because that's something that, like, the word optimization is something that you're going to continuously do. Like, it's not, like you say, it's the end step, but it's not the last thing you need to do. It's like, no, it's circular feedback loop. And I'd love to talk about that feedback loop. And Sam Ovens talks about, the feedback loop, that I've listened to some of his videos. And I want to touch on the importance of the dashboard and using that as a part of feedback, because some people in business don't know what a dashboard is. So I'll have a quick explanation. It's basically like in your car, it tells you how fast you're going, how much oil you need, temperature, all that sort of stuff. And same with, like, it gets more technical in bigger businesses. Just like if you progress from a car to an airplane, the dashboard's just way more technical. But there's a certain few things that you need to track, and it's like how much money you're making, like the revenue, the income, expenses, sales, leads, how much you're spending on marketing, cost per lead, cost per acquisition, all these different types of things. And it's dependent on each business. But let's talk about the correlation of your dashboard. Say I'm not getting as many leads into my business anymore. Would that be, I need to change some sort of system within my marketing and I pull a lever in the marketing because I'm getting a feedback from my dashboard that says, hey, Jaryd, look, you need to do something in this area. And that could be a system problem or could be a person problem. Is that something
Yeah.
that you
Yes.
is correlated?
Yeah. Yep. So there's a few things there. As you start to build out your dashboard, because you'll find what are the important KPIs to have on that dashboard as you get going. The critical client flow is a great place to start, which is almost like what you talked about. Think about what are the numbers at each one of those stages. How many leads are you getting? How many sales appointments are you getting? How many sales are you making? How many new clients are you getting? What are you selling them for? Like you figure out those numbers, and that becomes your dashboard. And then, as I said, business is about solving problems. And the way that I think about it, every problem in business is caused by a lack of a defined system, like not clearly written out, or a problem in an existing system. So it's either a system doesn't exist or the system exists and there's a problem. That's just the way that I look at business. So then I always look for what is the system solution to solve this problem. And every problem ends up stemming from that system issue. So if you don't have enough leads, you don't have enough marketing systems. If you're not converting well enough, your sales process isn't quite working. If you're having problem chasing up and getting your clients to pay on time, there's a problem in your system for when you're actually collecting the money or how you're following up. If you have a problem with your staff, then there's probably some issues early on with your recruitment system or your onboarding system. If you have a problem with your cash flow, you probably have a problem with the way that you're managing the incoming money and then allocating it out. Like it all comes back to systems. So if you use the dashboard, what it does is it enables you to spot where a problem is and then lets you narrow in. So sometimes, the dashboard, it's good to have a very simple dashboard to start with, but then you might drill in and go, hey, I'm having some problems with some leads here. So maybe you drill in deeper and then you go, okay, well, what are all of my different lead sources? So then you start to break up the number of leads based on all of the different lead sources. And then again, you just keep narrowing in. Okay, maybe Facebook's the problem that I want to really narrow in on. Okay, well, what's the problem here? Is it we're not spending enough? Is it a too high cost per click? But you start top level. That's what a dashboard does. It gives you high level and then enables you to go, well, the problem looks like it's in this area. And then you can narrow in to try and really find solutions. And then the reason you want to get the dashboard in place as well is so that you have a holistic view. See, business doesn't just happen isolated in one little point where, so let's say you go, I don't have enough leads. And if you didn't have a dashboard in place, maybe your solution or you don't have enough customers, right? Your solution is to go out and heavily optimize your sales process, and you end up over-promising, and you end up getting more sales because you're telling people what they want to hear, and you're over-promising, and then you're under-delivering. But that then creates a problem further down the line for your operations team. Now they're having more problems with getting projects delivered and completed. They're not getting any repeat client work. So just zooming in and narrowing in on one specific problem is not enough. You have to also understand, once you make that change, what is the flow-on effect through to the other parts. And that's why you have to have the dashboard in place so that you don't heavily optimize something, optimize it too far, and then break something further down the line. So that's another reason why I say optimization comes last, because you've got to first get just the minimum systems and processes into place, because your dashboard isn't going to make any sense if everybody has their own way of doing things. What a dashboard does is, helps you identify, we need to fix our sales process. But if everybody's doing their own separate sales process, then your numbers, there's too much variance there.
Yeah. And so that's a huge thing, is like a business owner could, or a system could be created by one person. Like you said, they could record the screen, do a screen share. And for everybody listening, Dave and I already talked about this earlier in the week, is like, it's so much easier to create a system when people can see what's being done on the screen, which is why a screen share is really good rather than just typing it out and having steps, because like a lot of people do learn better through visual and seeing it done. But coming back to what I was about to say on, like, you could have a staff member create a system or a screen share for that system of how something's done. And then that other staff member might be like, all right, I'm going to write this one up in a step-by-step edited form in text. And they may have two different approaches to the system. And then you got other team members that may do very off the system. Is there a particular way, without micromanaging too hard, because you could micromanage systems and over optimize, like you said, is there a particular way that you see could be done in business to keep everybody accountable and disciplined to sticking to one system and agree on the system? Would it be having a meeting and saying, hey guys, let's put this together?
Yeah. So there's a few things. Firstly, the quickest and easiest way to get the best system down is to identify. Again, this comes back to the idea that maybe you've already got some team members on in your team. Thinking about who can do that job to the best standard. Let's say you have a couple of salespeople, or you have a couple of people who are in, the back office who are answering customer service and they get rave reviews. Find out who is doing that job very competently and start there as your base level. So you record that person. At least then you'll get a win by bringing up all of your average performers to try and get them up to the standard of at least that before we even get, beyond any sort of heavy optimization. So firstly, making sure we capture a good baseline. Then once you've got the baseline down, definitely getting the team involved in the process as early as possible. So introducing and helping them to understand why the business is looking to systemize is key, and phrasing it in benefits or things that are beneficial to them. So what does a systemized business bring to a staff member? They can go away on holidays and they know that their job can continue to get complete by other team members. So when they come back, they don't come back to an inbox full of 100 different emails, no work has been done, and then they spend the next 3 months trying to catch up and make up for that 2-week holiday that they had. It might be that systemizing enables them to delegate tasks to lower team members, which then elevates their role and they become more valuable. So now they can be promoted up in the business because they're able to kind of pass tasks off and grow that way. It could be, just, and most of these things are more important when it comes to selling the idea of systems through to existing team members. Yeah. Because existing team members is where you'll get most of the resistance because they're used to doing things a certain way. But once you start to get this in place and you have a great hiring and onboarding process and you introduce this culture of systems and you do it early on, all your new hires, that's all they've ever known. They just know you as a systemized business. So it's really just about addressing those existing team members and then getting buy-in. And then it's quite a complex area in that there are a lot of moving parts and you're managing individuals and everybody's personality is a little bit different. So when it comes time to integrate, having someone to also help and manage that process is key. Oftentimes the business owner isn't the best person for that. Like business owners oftentimes are these big picture thinking type people and they're jumping from one thing to the next, and sometimes it's good to have almost like an operations person which sits side by side that business owner, which can help manage the team and the day-to-day operations. That becomes part of this transition period, but having the right tools in place as well. So obviously you need to get the step-by-step documentation down, and you have that in a location, and you train your team to go, hey, if you've got a problem, this is the first place we go. So rather than the staff member coming to Jaryd and saying, hey, Jaryd, how do I do this? If Jaryd really wants to help, he can go, all right, well, let's have a look in System Hub together and see if we can find the right system for that. At least then you're still helping and you're training them to look, and then over time, you start to teach them that they're looking to System Hub or wherever you get them stored, look there first.
Delegate responsibility.
Yep. And then you also want to then have your project management software. So that's another big thing. Something like an Asana, Basecamp, Podio, Teamwork, PM, Trello, it doesn't matter what, but you want something where you can assign a who is doing what by when, and you link the system. So that way there's a level of accountability, because if someone's checking off like saying, I've done this task, and there's a link to a system, then you can start to manage via systems. If a problem arises, you go, is the problem in the system, or is the problem that the person didn't follow the system? The problem is always at first the system. It's never the individual. So is the reason this problem occurred due to something that's not properly outlined or articulated in the system? If it is, great, we just found a new way to improve the system, we tweak it, next time, fantastic. If the team member didn't follow the system, but they've been assigned a task and there's a link to a how-to document, now it becomes a management type thing where you go, our minimum requirement here is if there is a system that you're following that. So I need you to have that open. I don't care. You don't have to have it open every single time if you're executing flawlessly. But if you're not executing flawlessly, then I expect you to have that system or process open. And that's,
Sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, and that's, some business owners struggle with the enforcement of that. Some team members will follow this culture. We're really talking about a cultural shift in the organization. So that's
selling it to, like you mentioned just briefly, it's really about selling those systems to your pre-existing staff, and then bringing the new staff that come in that have never known systems before, is if they're not doing it right or they're not following the system, is reselling them, which is just outlining the value it's going to add to their life by doing so. Because I feel like the best business owner is only making the business so much better, not just for the business owner, but for everybody in the staff and every single client as well, right?
And it's a little bit of a misnomer that employees and staff don't follow systems or don't like systems. That sometimes a lot of business owners don't. That's one of the reasons this is such a huge blind spot for a lot of business owners, because they're not passionate or get excited about it. But a lot of staff like it because it sets the expectation. Yep. They know what they need to do. They know what's expected of them. They know where to get an answer if they have a question without having to make themselves look silly by, I'm asking you this for the third time. Surely I should have picked it up by now. It's and certain cultures as well respond very heavily to being system and process driven. So it's sometimes, like I said, usually a lot of roadblocks and misconceptions and myths that are in the business owner's head that stops this getting adopted. So you kind of either need to break through it, or you need to find someone who can, help you through that process, get that operations person and someone to help enforce it. But also a lot of it will depend on the size of the business as well. Because, like I said, if you're less than 3 staff, then, you don't want to spend too much time writing detailed processes out. You should probably just go out and sell your products and services and get some traction. And then once you get to the certain size, that's when you really want to take this bull by the horns and bridge that gap.
Yeah. So that 2 to 3 man team, I guess it's really good to have them create systems for you and for the business before you do those extra hires, and you probably refine them. And that way, the new culture that comes in as you expand, you've already got that in place. So the training, because what I've done with my businesses is that when I hired new staff, is like I created systems before I hired. So the systems were part of the training.
Yes. Yeah. And we do a thing where, like our job descriptions actually have systems linked to the job description. So when we run an ad and we're in the recruitment process, we share with people early on, these are the types of tasks you're going to be doing as part of your role. If you don't feel that you can follow a process or you don't want to do these sorts of things, then you're probably not a good fit for this position. And you set that expectation right up front.
That's awesome. Man, Dave, like I'd love to just keep going, but I know like our listeners will start, their band will start to drop off. Where did you get started in learning this? Like, did you have a coach or a mentor? Like, was in reading Michael's books, and everybody that hasn't read the E-Myth, I read it this year. It's amazing. Like, how did you start learning this, and how important do you feel it is for other business owners to really have somebody on their side?
Yeah. I think for me, I've recognized it as the master skill for a business owner. If you can master systems, you really start to master what business is really all about, because business is a collection of these systems. The first thing that needs to happen is you need to get sold on the idea of systems. So read the E-Myth, read Traction, read Scaling Up, read Built to Sell. There's a bunch of different books that talk about this idea, and they'll sell you on the idea of systems. And then where I recognize the big gap then is the how to. And that's really what systemology then was, because I feel like I got sold on this idea of systems and I was all in, but then I was like, yeah, but where do I start? And how do I extract that out of their heads? How do I organize it? How do I get buy-in from the team? And that's then what we tried to, the problem that I'm solving with systemology. And that's the system for systemizing a business. So it's, as far as like where to go, there's a lot of information out there around sort of systems, like I said, for at least getting familiar with the idea. One of my big favorites is Traction and Scaling Up. Both of those are great books thinking about business a little bit more holistically. E-Myth is a great starting point. Then you might move to something like Traction and Scaling Up. And I think I'm trying to think of, I didn't have a particular coach. Kind of felt like I figured out a lot of this on my own, but the problem with that is it just took an incredibly long time. Like I literally got stuck in that digital agency for probably about, I would say 7 years too long. Like I think really a good few years of business, you get up and running, you get some traction, start selling, you get the runs on the board, you start to build your team. That's a really big, perfect time. But the danger is you don't want to get stuck there, because time moves quickly. You get on the treadmill and 10 years goes by and then you're like, oh wow, it's like you don't progress because you're solving those same problems over and over and over. And that's probably the biggest thing that I just want to kind of get through. And I feel, I lost a lot of time because of that. And that's I suppose set me on the journey to try and teach other people that you don't want to get stuck there.
That's the exact same thing that happened to me, if I'm going to be honest. And it's not in systems, but in my entrepreneurial journey is like, I bought into this whole self-made millionaire thing. And it really aggravates me that people are calling them self-made millionaires, because if you've read a book, you listen to a podcast, and you watched a YouTube video or something, you're not self-made. You've got education from somewhere. And so I bought into this thing, and it sent me around in circles, much like you, like solving those same problems over and over. 7 years. For 7 years, I did that for so long for myself. And that's exactly why like all my clients come to me, is like, and they've become a part of our communities because they had been the same as me and the same as you, running around in circles, trying to get out of the grind. And then they get in and it's like, all right, cool. That problem's solved. Like, learn my mistakes. And when you can learn from somebody else's mistakes, when you like pick up, read books or join a community or whatever, like you can just get out of that loophole. Right.
Yeah. And I think particularly in that space that you're talking about, you really just want to find one or two people that you really resonate with, and then you shut off all of the other noise, because there's so much noise online, and that ends up doing more harm than good. Find one or two people that you resonate with, and then narrow in. Obviously, those one or two people, it's almost like it's a system. You know how I said one of the first things that you do is you identify a person in your organization who is producing the result to a good standard. And then you capture what it is that they're doing. It's the same. You find someone who's already producing that result, and then just focusing on that process.
Yeah.
and then get the result that way.
Yeah. And because, yeah, focus in on that person's system, that coach or that mentor or whatever, right? But like, it's because this is what I did is I try to learn from, I went from seminar to seminar, book to book, reading all these sorts of things. And like we're talking about space before, is I was trying to do this system and then this other system was correlating with this system and then, or not correlating, sorry, like just not working out. And then I'd bring in another system into the space and another one. And it's
Yes.
just
Yeah.
like all this noise of like, well, this guy's telling me to do this. And then you do a little bit of that, but then you do a little bit of something else and it just doesn't work and you go in that loop again. So I'm so glad that you pointed that out because picking like
And
1 to 2 and just staying the course.
yeah. And then the other thing to learn once you get going is go through the system, once or twice as prescribed. But then the real way to then break through is you start to make the system your own because you've got all of your learnings and teachings and things that work for you. So a system is, in the context that we're talking about it, is a great way to kind of get started, follow in someone's footsteps.
Yeah.
But ultimately, for you to have buy-in, you need to understand each step at great detail so that when variations pop up that are outside of the system, you know how to solve that problem because you have a deep understanding of that step, not just, this step doesn't line up with what's going on right now. Now I don't know what to do because I've blindly been following the system.
Yeah.
And that's when you start to then create your own system and you start to evolve it and find what works for you. And that's really the holy grail of where you're trying to get to. But you've got to first follow a path, and it's like practicing the basics. Get that down and get really good at those before you become the master, and then you start, the optimization phase.
Yeah, I love that. So it's like embody parts of the system before you start creating your own and then optimizing it. Like the more I talk about systems with you, I'm just like, systems are life, right? Like, and
Yes.
life is a system too.
Yeah. I did a TEDx talk in the Netherlands about systems, and
Yeah.
I didn't want to make it about business, so I talked in terms of life systems, and I used the analogy of life being a collection of systems, and whether you're conscious of these systems or not, you will still feel the effects of those systems. So if you're running an unhealthy system, if you are not eating well, if you're not exercising, you've got a poor sleep and you're running this system, even if you didn't even know that would make you unhealthy, you're still going to end up being unhealthy because that's just the way that the world works. So you need to become aware that these systems exist. Then you need to start to identify which systems are worth you improving and spending attention on and focus on, becoming conscious of them, and then becoming the engineer of these systems. And then you start to, collect them. And the real key ultimately is to figure out what are the most important systems that are relevant to you based on your beliefs and model of the world, because there's so much to do. You don't want to be sitting there trying to optimize a system on how to tie your shoelaces when it doesn't really have a big impact. Like you want to find out what are the big rocks. Well, health is a big rock. So get the fundamentals of what is required for your system to produce the outcome that you're after. But now we've moved on to episode number 2.
Yeah. And just to wrap up with like the rocks, for everybody that don't know what the rocks are, if you've got a bucket and you got big rocks that mean more bigger things, and you got the little rocks as well. I think it's Stephen Covey. If people haven't watched that video on YouTube, Google or YouTube Stephen Covey rocks or something, and you'll see how important it is that people leave out rocks out of their bucket, which is a very big part of their life, like health, relationships and stuff like that. Dave, like that was really awesome episode. I'm so grateful for your time. I'm sure everybody got so much value from it. I did myself personally. Where can everybody go find out more about you and what you're doing with System Hub and your processes?
Yeah, definitely check out systemhub.com. There's lots of links there to my social media and get on the list, all those sorts of things. And then timing wise, depending on when someone's listening to this, we're running an event. It's a virtual event called the Business Systems Summit, which maybe we can link to. And basically what I do is I find a collection of 40 experts in, I think of business in terms of the different departments. So I think sales, marketing, HR, finance, management, and I get a handful of experts in each of those different departments. And then I have them share a system or a process that they use inside their business. I take those recordings, I give them to my team, we document them, and then basically attendees get a collection of 30 or 40 best practice systems that can be the starting point that they can then start to deploy in their business. So it's free to attend, and it's depending on when someone's listening to this, but you can head to businesssystemsummit.com. I know this episode's coming out just before the event, so it's probably a good chance for you to check it out.
Yeah, this will be released just before. So guys, go away, check it out, because if you got any value from this podcast with David, I mean, even if you got the smallest amount, you're going to be able to see how much value you can get with that whole experience that he's offering there. So please go away, check it out. It's something you surely need to be a part of. For people, Dave, that are buying sites, obviously they don't want to go away and buy a dud or a lemon because they're going to find it so much harder to scale and input these systems. So what I give people is I give them some free resources, a due diligence framework to make sure they cover all parts of the due diligence before they actually buy it. And then I have a website evaluator tool. So people that want that listening, go away and grab it, buyingonlinebusiness.com/free resources. They're going like hotcakes.
It's like
so many people are jumping in.
A system for buying websites.
Yes. So people follow that's what my community is, the people that follow my system for buying sites, right? Systems are life. That's my takeaway from this.
Love it.
David, thanks so much. Really appreciate you coming on. And anybody that did love this episode, please be sure to share it, like, subscribe. And if you did like it, let me know what you liked about it by leaving a review so I can actually bring more people to the show like Dave and bring more value to the show that you're actually after. So please give me some feedback there, and that'll be a feedback loop for my system to make my podcast better.
Love it. Perfect. Thanks for the invite.